I want to just thank all three groups. You guys offered different perspectives, but of course they are all so interconnected and all of it is important. So thank you very, very much. All right, I know this group is not shy. Any questions for the presenters?
I had a question for the first group who had the matrix or the rubric, whatever you want to call it. Where did you guys actually implement that? Was that during staff development time? Was that your leadership group that did that? Can you just give us a little background on that?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So as it relates to implementation, during the presentation, and I could have maybe spent a little more time there, I talked about this structure of equity teams. So at every single site and at several different, almost in all of our departments at the system level, we have a group of people either at that site and department that are really focused on matters of race and equity at that site. And these are tools. This is a tool that they engage with as they unpack some of the things that are occurring and as they think about what we should be doing differently. So that's a tool that can be used in that type of setting, or this type of framework around next action thinking as it relates to community engagement. And as we talk about deepening understanding and getting multiple perspectives, this similar type of tool can be used in that setting as well.
And just using it with teachers as well during their PLC time or their data team time. I've worked with teachers in that sense to say, what's going on with the students? Let's take a look at maybe what's lacking, what's missing. Are they not feeling connected? Do they not feel safe in your space? And then use that within that PLC time as well with teachers.
Thank you. Many of you spoke about how the changes that you wanted to have come about took time, years sometimes. How do you appropriately set expectations both internally and externally to allow that time to grow and change?
Jump in, Minneapolis.
I can just speak from a building administrator, which would be, I think as a building administrator, part of it is just making it a priority, making it that this is an important piece of who we are. When we look at our community, I guess as building leaders, as school leaders, we set the tone, we set the culture, we set the mentality. We give the permission, and I think when you create a culture mentality that this is important, and you're willing to say yes, let's try this, or hey, let's explore this, or let's have this conversation. I think I mean, we know you work with teachers and educators every day. There's lots of really good ideas out there. There's a lot of passion out there. So I think by creating that culture and being at least from a building administrator perspective, being willing to say, yeah, let's try this, or let's carry this conversation. Let's see what else is out there, what we can do.
I think for us, it really is, there is a creative sense of urgency, I would say, about the work. But if the work lives in many houses, then it moves forward and gathers a momentum rather than one person doesn't stop or start the work. So the more that we cross-departmentalize, I think, that's where we've seen the momentum start to gain for us. As well as really having tangible pieces. That's a piece. And then focusing small and starting at small. And one thing about our school district, I think we're a pretty competitive group. So, if you start at one place hears that this is happening, that's a way to grow, I think, too.
We can pass it on down the line. I think for me, and I report to Rochelle. So in my role too, our academic plan is really grounded in equity. So equity in all of our visuals, that anything that goes out has equity at the center. And that has really been evidenced over just our work from the initiation of that plan to now. We're really, when we're in meetings, when we're in schools, when we're in departments, no matter where we are in the district, that is evidenced by the conversations that we're having and how we're challenging our mindset. So I think the visual, the talk, and the calling it out and being really specific has really helped to move the work for me and the evidence that I see in our work.
And again, going back to our PowerPoint, this is chapter 1. So we know there are many more chapters to come, but this is the start to the work. And I think as we continue to cross-departmentalize, this is how we dig deeper into what the needs are of our district.
Okay. Do you have an answer?
Yeah. So I was going to add, so for us, it's a multi-pronged approach. The way we view it is that, so it starts with our strategic plan. As we think about our priority results, we specifically isolate race, and we call these things out in the guiding document, and that we align all of our resources, human and financial, to. But the other piece of it is that just because you've legislated or you created this structure doesn't mean that necessarily immediately impacts hearts and minds, right? So we also look at that development around capacity, will, and skill. And we also, in order to do that, we have to create systems of support. So when I talk about things like equity team, professional development, all of these things are wrapped around to support this strategic plan and these priorities that we align all of our human and financial resources to.
I agree with what's said, and I'd like to wrap up with a story, which I think is relevant, because we're all talking about systems, and we have a sense of urgency. But in my first year of administration, I was an intern at Hopkins West Junior High School with Bob St. Clair. And about a month into my job, which was assistant junior high school principal, where I kept pretty busy, Bob made the point. He said that as you work every day, staff will come up with ideas for change, for improving. They're at the point where they see the need. Think of that idea like a small flame. And as a leader, you have the opportunity in 1,000 different ways to put out that flame. If you're too busy, or you want to critique their idea before they've explained it, or it doesn't fit with something else. Think of the ways whenever an idea comes up from staff or from students or from community, how you can nurture that flame so that it can shed light on what you're doing. And I think that's an important story, because when we're, as leaders, whether administrators or board members or parents who are eager to change, we are trying to figure out the right way to do things. But the folks who are the closest, the children, the staff, the support staff, are going to come up with ideas, and we have to be aware of how those ideas may shed new light on this very challenging and complicated issue.
All right, thank you. Do we have any more questions? Really? I have a quick question. So, well, it's probably not quick, but so 3 very different presentations, but what we saw was crossover of equity to access and racial disparities, but then the racial disparities in special ed, and then which kids have access to the Y. Right? So sometimes there's a concentration of all of these. You have kids who are homeless and over-identified in special ed, suspended, don't have access to the Y, all these things. So, the importance of that cross-partnership, I think, in all these conversations. So as the Y, are you working just with the superintendent? Do you work with broader staff? How is it that you bring in and address the broader access issues, because it's not only by race, it's embedded in a lot of things in our systems that perpetuates that.
Absolutely. And in fact, I could answer, but I also want to just ask Todd if you want to try to answer that. Okay. So I think, you had this is a multi-layered question, right? So the YMCA exists to serve, right? So our motivation here is that we exist. Our vision to serve relentlessly with our community until all can thrive in each stage of life, and we do our very best to live that out. And so our job in a local YMCA is to connect with as many different leaders as we can in the community at the school level. That means I interface and have long conversations with the FIA teacher at Matoska Elementary School, and ideas germinate at that level. Sometimes it's a hallway conversation over at the school with John Leininger or Tammy Van Overbeck at Birch Elementary, or another one. Sometimes it's a direct call to the assistant superintendent or the soup. It just depends on the question and the subject, but where it started was a small flame. Started at Willow Elementary School in a conversation that I was having with one elementary school teacher, kind of on a whim and a hope. And so those are the kinds of things that I think make some sense. And for us as an organization, providing access and opportunity is one of the things. Engaging kids is what we do best. And so I don't want to go too much further with that explanation, other than that's what we're driven to do. And if there's a hope or an idea that you have and that you want to share in your context or your community, and you want to visit with me or someone else from the Y, I'd be more than pleased to connect you.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to ask Todd here, what is Hetty Wall's proper title? Do you want to? Would you explain what Hetty is doing and the Mission Impact Council and some of the things that the Y is doing system-wide?
Thanks, Michael. Hetty Walls is our Vice President of Social Responsibility at the YMCA, a fairly new position. And one of the visions that we had when we created that position was, how do we, when we approach social responsibility, do that from an external framework instead of an insular framework? Because we can define social responsibility and try to enact it however we want, but it's not connecting to community in a way that is truly social responsibility. It isn't social responsibility. So that was the first thing we did, is try to define that with community. And similar to the presentation around mission, we created something called the Mission Impact Council. And this organization now has over 40 organizations, schools as part of this, and it has become the social responsibility arm for the YMCA. Not only locally, but the national Y now has the framework that we have created here. And we met about a week ago in North Minneapolis. And this has become the organization and the framework that is now co-facilitated by the YMCA. Hetty is essentially the lone executive for this, the United Way of the Greater Twin Cities, and Youth Thrive as far as the fiscal agent as we look at this model. But the whole thing has now, we have done a number of different immersions into different community to help us define social responsibility and identify the core issues that as a group we should focus on. And what transpired in these 7 different communities, when I say communities, I'm talking homeless and highly mobile, Somali community, African American community, Native American community, and on and on. And the top 3 things for us to focus on that were employability, cultural competency, and leadership development. So as we look as a Mission Impact Council, that has become our focus in close partnership with schools. And one of the things we did at trying to be a catalyst for social responsibility, and this is new for a YMCA, we just created an RFP and granted out $100,000 to do this work. The only caveat to these organizations is, similar to this, they have to partner with the YMCA. That is our opportunity to be out in community. To your question, how do we connect? That's one of the ways. So around social responsibility, and this is the question I asked when we were in North Minneapolis, do our actions align with our rhetoric? And that's the question that we are continually to try to ask. And I think we all need to continue to ask, do our actions align with our rhetoric? And that's the one thing we're trying to get after.
Well, I was really hoping you were going to get to the summit, because I went to the MIC summit, the youth opportunity, and it was very relevant but very well done, and it really spoke to what our youth needed, and it was youth voice, authentic youth voice. So thank you for that work. And so it is time for us to wrap up. We are going to have about 12 minutes to do what you need to do and go to the next session. But I want to thank you guys for coming and participating, and thank our presenters who have to do it all over again in a minute. And it was just fantastic. Appreciate it.